lost in this conversation. Let's turn this thing on and see if it's in tune. Hello, this is Leland, and this is the second episode of Lost in Conversation. Before I get too far into this, I wanted to say that I started recording these conversations thinking that they would be an interesting audio companion to my Substack, which I call Lost in America. And while this is still certainly that, and many of you are listening because you found this through Substack, I've also made this available on most popular podcast platforms. So it's probably best to just call this a podcast. If you found this in some way other than through Substack, I would encourage you to check out Lost in America, which is where I write occasionally about my life in photography and some thoughts on history, travel, and place. I have several conversations ready to release, and I will be putting new conversations out each month on the first Friday of the month. And that's the plan at least through the summer. If people tell me they want more or they want episodes more often, I'll consider accelerating things, but for now, I think one episode a month is a healthy place, so that's where we'll stay. Today, I'm pleased to welcome my friend Kim Yaged. Kim is an award-winning writer and multidisciplinary artist whose work spans theater, fiction, poetry, and film. Kim's voice is bold, incisive, and unapologetically original, exploring themes of identity and social justice with both wit and depth. Her work has appeared in publications around the world, and her creative projects have been featured on stages and screens alike. Whether she's crafting intimate character portraits or tackling systemic issues, Kim brings a unique blend of intellect and emotional resonance to everything she creates. If you want to know more about Kim, you can check out her websites, kimyaged.com and kimyaged.net, and you can check out her podcast, Kim Spot, and follow her on social media. There'll be links to everything in the show notes. I asked Kim to talk with me about being creative and finding one's audience in today's complicated climate. Kim, introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Kim Yaged. I'm a writer. My background is in theater, TV, film, and I guess sort of a bit of this new media world that we're venturing into. I kind of largely identify as a script writer, but I've written poetry, kids' stories. I mean, pretty much anything you throw at me, I've written. Really love dialogue, which is probably why I'm drawn towards scripts and storytelling, and sort of inviting people to explore the world in a different way.
So we have been talking about how the world has become very complicated. I guess that's the safest way of putting it.
Sure.
So how does that impact what you do?
I think at this moment in time, it's very hard to not self-censor. And I would say that that even predates the most recent turn of events that makes things even crazier. But I don't mean to only lay it on social media, but I think it largely is coming from social media. This kind of am I going to get attacked, and therefore how am I going to present my work if I'm going to get that kind of backlash? So I think there's
Does your work fit? What side does your work fit on in the culture war kind of questions that you have to?
I think, but I think it's not even just culture war. I think it's just with anything. Like, you're putting yourself out in a space where it's very normative to be nasty. And I suppose, you know, like, let's just take the theater world or even film, like or TV. There are critics, but it feels different. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like this world is a little bit different than so and so appointed critic who's going to tell your thing sucks, and certainly that hurts. But there's a different tone to it now, I think. But yeah,
The difference being critic and a troll.
maybe, yeah, that's true too. And also, they're like a critic, like a traditional, let's say, I don't know, it's hard to define that word, but previously, when you had a TV or film or movie critic, you weren't worried about someone, like you said, trolling you, coming, attacking you or your people, or telling your boss to fire you or that kind of stuff.
And you do worry about that now.
I personally don't because I don't hang out on social media, but I think in terms of the tone of stuff. But I do I guess there are certain things that I have been debating how to write them because of what we're talking about, and I haven't figured that out. My newest script, on motherhood, tiptoes into it a little bit, but, I think there are larger conversations to have about stuff that I think the world feels a little very militant right now, and, I've always been interested in stereotypes and that kind of stuff, and what I'm finding myself increasingly interested in is that middle ground, right? Like, how do we actually get away from these extremes that are really ultimately the same thing and have conversations that come to I don't know if it's compromise, but conversations that come to a middle, that come to a some kind of way of doing things that I don't think anybody or the vast majority of us aren't kinda content with the way things are right now. So what do we do?
So, I mean, that leads me to this other idea. I mean, if the world is very militant, if it also has a very short attention.
Yeah.
So, is that an advantage in that situation that essentially your audience have a very short attention span, or is that a disadvantage?
I suppose it depends on how you look at it. For me, um, I think there's a pressure to make work differently than I have, and, I guess
Elaborate on that a little bit. What does that mean?
Um, well, even just, like, if we take, uh, like, one of the really weird things now when you pitch, like, say, a screenplay is someone's asking for your document, like, people don't wanna read, they don't wanna actually read a script. So that's very weird to me, right?
They
So
wanna read a short treatment of it.
yeah, they wanna read, like they want a deck that describes your script, you know? So and on some level, and particularly in, like, say, a Hollywood environment, it's no different. Like, there are people who are really great at pitching who aren't necessarily great scriptwriters, but they sell over and over and over again. Or maybe they're decent scriptwriters, but they're not necessarily as good a scriptwriters as somebody else. But it doesn't matter because that way of pitching in a room or sending a deck matters more. I do think we are underestimating our audience in terms of attention span because like, look, audiobooks are booming. That's not a 5-minute or a 2-minute or a 30-second thing. Um, so some of it comes down to money. Um, but yes, like and also in terms of aesthetics, I think social media um has really changed aesthetics. And I think there are certain people who distrust something that's more polished in the way you and I were probably used to doing stuff when we first started doing this. And even still, like it's hard to be like, oh, well, that's not exactly how I imagined it in my mind, but if I actually made it the way I imagined it in my mind, people would be like, "Oh, that's too polished, and that's not what I'm going for." Um, so there's a lot of things that you can get caught up in your head about, and I think it's really important to figure out how to protect oneself from that, so you can write what you wanna put out in the world, unless you're writing for somebody else, and that's okay too. Like, I think all of these forms of writing, communicating are valid, and the really sweet spot is when you find how to make that marriage work. Like, what is the right way of delivering the right thing that you're doing? And when you nail that, it feels really, really good.
So you're doing some different things, like basically releasing things in sort of episodic formats, through
Mm.
podcasts, through other things. Is that a satisfying way of reshaping things to take advantage of?
I think yes and no. Like for example, last May when I did my piece Love and Hate in the Time of COVID on Kim Spot, like I did each day I did a snippet, which is very digestible. And the thing is as I was doing it, um, it makes things spike, right? The algorithm loves the fact that I'm putting something out every day, but that's not sustainable, at least for me. So that's one of those things that hurts my head a lot. Um, so I'm certainly exploring things, and when I'm it's sort of like getting back to what I just said. Like it's each thing depends on what it says. Like if I'm a hired gun and I'm doing like my reggae on page thing, there's a very specific way I'm doing that. But I'm also very proud of it. Like I think it's solid work. Not everything is solid work, but there's a difference between how I would approach that and how I'd be like, let me go funk around with some of my scripts and put them out in the world in a different way. Um, and I am interested in doing more of that.
More of the retooling kind of.
Yeah, yeah, like seeing like some of my stuff that's, a lot of it is just cost and means and all of that. Um, I have these scripts that I really like. Would it just be fun to, in a less polished way, record them with people I adore and put them out in the world for, for folks to enjoy?
Right. Um, how do you feel about writing for a room full of people as your audience still? I mean, that's what you were trained to do, was to write for stage, right?
My MFA is in theater. Ironically, except for this un-Motherhood script, I actually haven't really been doing much theater uh, in the past few years. Like I was joking about, I'm not a playwright anymore, but it is funny when I talk to myself. I talk about myself. I frequently am saying, "Well, I'm a playwright," and people even say, "Like, why do you say that?" And it's like, I don't know. I guess it's like your founding. Like, if I'm like, I'm not an artist. I'm not a poet, but yet I've done all of that. So it's sort of weird. I will say the thing that I really do love is that stichomythia. It's putting words in people's mouths and getting play and laughs and all of that. Um, but having said that, I talk about this a lot when I have conversations like this. That to me, it's all a puzzle, and solving that puzzle is really fun. And sometimes, like say, if you're getting hired to do something, there are more parameters put on that puzzle, but none of it is either better or worse. It's just what are you solving for and what are the rules in that particular instance. If I'm writing just for myself, I don't have to pay attention to any rules. I get to decide how I'm doing it. And then with something like Love and Hate in the Time of COVID, like I'm doing all the rules because I actually produced it, and I'm finding that people who are performing and editing it and all of that. Um, so I think there are pluses and minuses of all of it. In terms of getting in front of people, um, that's something I've really been curious about lately, is how to find my people and make stuff in a way that feels resonant. And I think in a little bit of way, maybe that's why I'm recording stuff, because I get to have more control over that. But I am also interested in getting back out into the theater world and finding my people, so to speak, and making more stuff, whether it's all generated from me or being like, do we want to make something together, or how that might look. I feel a little bit less judgmental than I have maybe at other times about what does it mean to make theater.
So in terms of finding your people, and I would assume at one point you felt like you had found your people, or at least that you knew who your audience was. Um, I've talked to a lot of people who attribute some of the loss of that to COVID,
Mhm.
and then just to sort of basic changes in the culture. And I'm just curious, like, what do you feel like this is something that is going to return people to that kind of community of shared experience in a room at some point? Is that going to become important to us again?
I personally think people are craving human contact separate from theater, period. Um, I do think uh, COVID derailed a lot of live performance in a way that I don't think it's come back. I'm not sure that it will come back. And I don't know that's necessarily the same. Like I personally was like working on a play called The Suicide Blog that I was very sure was going to go up. And I think a lot of us have those stories where like that's dumb. Like it's probably, I mean, and who knows, like maybe The Suicide Blog will get made in a different place and time and way. But I personally think almost every theater person I know, director, writer, producer, had a project that went, when COVID started, and they, in all likelihood, never got back to it because the world has changed. Um, I I do think I do think coming together is useful, whether it's theater or not. And I think maybe that's also why I'm saying, like, my opinion about what is theater or what is live performance is much less judgmental than it was before, because I do think the curative nature of things is what matters more right now. And I do think it is, like, even as I'm saying, like, oh, my people, like, the reality is the Love and Hate in the time of COVID got made because of quote unquote my people, and so I have to keep reminding myself of that. Like, it was a beautiful, beautiful experience. Like, we were all doing it virtually. So, no, I don't have quote unquote my people all in the same space, but yet I have this very charmed experience where I've lived in Berlin, I've lived in Costa Rica, I've lived all over the US, and there are people who value my work and they're willing to show up in a way that's really striking to me, and I don't mean to discount that.
That's a wrap.